Hey guys, welcome to another edition of On the Beat. Joined by my fellow basketball beat writers Andrew John and Tony Olivero. We'll be previewing Syracuse basketball versus William and Mary this Sunday. And the first thing we want to touch on before this game is just the overall poor play, especially in the first half of Syracuse this season to start, in the first 3 games. And Jim Boeheim has been everywhere, calling his team overrated, and then kind of backing off from that after Detroit. But 2 of the guys that have struggled specifically are Chris Joseph and Fab Melo. And Andrew, just starting off on that, what have you seen from each that's caused them to struggle, I guess?
Yeah, it's really surprising from both players' perspective. A lot of people expected Chris Joseph to come in and to be the leader of this team. He's really struggled shooting the ball, especially in the first half of each of those first 3 games, and he's only shooting about 26% from the field right now. And I think that's something that we talked about in the preseason, how he is going to improve his jump shot, but he's really going to have to prove it on the court in order to be a leader for Syracuse this season. And for Fab Melo, is obviously it goes beyond the foul trouble. I think he's getting used to the faster pace of the college game, and it's going to take a little bit of time for him to get adjusted.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 2 very important things for this team right now. Both situations are concerning without a doubt. But I think you have to say, and I think after looking at both situations, you have to come to the conclusion that Fab Melo's struggles are more concerning than Chris Joseph's, because you've seen it from Chris Joseph before. And also, he is someone who's played within the system before. He's put up points before. He's had big games. But Fab Melo's never done anything at the collegiate level. And I think that's what Coach Boeheim's trying to get across both to the media and to his players through the media, that, you guys haven't done anything yet. And that message might be pointed at some of the other freshmen, namely Dion Waiters, more so than Fab Melo. But what he's trying to get across right now to both the team and I think the media at large is that, these guys haven't done anything, and it's a concern right now. And we're looking for them to step up. And just with that, even though Chris Joseph has struggled mightily this year, even though people have thought he was going to be the guy for SU, Fab Melo's struggles are much more concerning, I feel.
But I still think that Chris Joseph can be the guy. He's just got to get out of the shooting funk that he's in right now.
Yeah, you guys both bring up good points, and Jim Boeheim said the other night that, without that second half against Northern Iowa, Chris Joseph's probably shooting 15% from the field. So it is concerning, but and Fab Melo's struggles are concerning as well. But on to another guy who has been a surprise, and that's Musakeda, and he's kind of benefited from Fab Melo's struggles. Against Detroit, he played 22 minutes, and he played more minutes than Melo. So, Andrew, at this point, do you see him becoming more of a factor in SU starting lineup, especially than Fab Melo?
Yeah, I don't know if they plan to move him to the starting lineup or not. I think he has been effective off the bench, and it's good to have a big man who can come off the bench, and he can play both the forward position and the center position, so can come in for either Rick Jackson or Fab Melo. So I don't know if that necessarily will change, but he definitely has been a bright spot for Syracuse in the front court this season. And I think that that will probably continue at least up until conference play, and we'll see what happens.
Even though Boeheim has made strong statements so far this year, as going as far to call the team the most overrated team he's ever had at this point in the season, calling out players, freely, I don't see him making the jump of pulling Fab Melo out of the starting lineup anytime soon. It's the big time recruit. It's the guy everybody's kind of is looking to see things from, and he's just bigger. He's more skilled, even though he hasn't been showing it, than by Musakeda. They're not going to just give up on Fab Melo, before anywhere, even before or after they get to I would imagine Madison Square Garden to take on Michigan State. Never mind Atlantic City next week. It's just because it's too much riding on making sure you have that depth with Melo there, because right now they don't have any depth, because you're resorting to a By Musakeda. And even if Melo keeps struggling like this, you move Rick Jackson as your lone low post guy. Who are you going to go to? Nobody else is stepping up. So it's a predicament right now. And it's not just with regards to By Musakeda or Fab Melo. With all that being said, By Musakeda has been having a very good year thus far with regards to the expectations that many people expected from him. But I don't think we can really take too much from it, because they haven't played anyone that has caliber height, and it'll show again this weekend against the William & Mary team that might be the worst team SU's faced so far this year in non-exhibition games. So it's going to be interesting to see until they get down to Atlantic City, I guess, how much of this is real production from By.
And just finally on to two guys. You know, Chris Joseph has struggled, but onto two guys who you know would be there, who are the kind of the constants of this team so far. And those guys are Scoop Jardine and Rick Jackson. You know, Scoop scoring 27 points the other night, and Rick Jackson playing all 40 minutes and grabbing 22 rebounds. You know, as the constants of this team, Andrew, you know, how big, I guess, have they been so far?
Yeah, they've been huge. You know, Rick Jackson, you know, probably the biggest difference maker so far in the first 3 games is not only has he, you know, obviously been able to score the basketball, you know, fairly decently, but just the rebounding. He's been getting you know, blocking shots, getting steals. He's been able to run the floor, which is something that we just haven't seen from him in previous years. And obviously Scoop basically single-handedly, you know, putting Syracuse ahead in the previous game. I think that against Detroit, you know, his scoring was the difference, although Rick Jackson was doing a lot of the dirty work. Those two guys together, if it weren't for those two guys, Syracuse obviously wouldn't be 3-0 at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned some good things, but the thing I think that sticks out most when you mention these guys is the numbers. Because against these teams, they should be doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Scoop Jardine, you know, if he is as good as everyone's expecting him to be, if he's going to take on a role, you know, the similar role that many people recently on Jim Boeheim coach teams have kind of undertaken, you know, a la maybe a Johnny Flynn or even Eric Devendorf at times, you're going to need Scoop to score 27 points. All those guys did that. Paul Harris did that. You know, all those guys did that for Jim Boeheim. So against these early season teams, if you really only have 4 guys who are contributing, Scoop Jardine's going to need to do that. And Rick Jackson, you know, hauling in all the rebounds he has, he's going to need to do that as well. So I think it's more so what's expected out of these guys at this point. And I think those are the 2 guys who are showing the flashes of what needs to be done. Brandon Trish, only a sophomore, I think he's still getting there. But I think those 2 guys are the guys who have shown they're ready for what they need to do this year. Everyone else hasn't shown it, much like Coach Boeheim has said after these first few games.
All right, we're going to move on to our predictions. I think we're all expecting SU to take care of a pretty bad William and Mary team this weekend, but Andrew, just take us in and what you expect SU to do this weekend.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that was mentioned by the players in the locker room after the Detroit game was that they had, including the exhibition, they had played, you know, 5 games in the span of, you know, just under 10 days, and now they get 4 days of rest, and I think that that'll really help them. And you know, I expect them to come out big, and I do expect them to have a good first half, which is something we haven't seen out of them. So I'm predicting SU to win 89-61. I think that they'll be able to get some points, which is something that they haven't been able to do in the last few games.
Yeah, I mean, against this William & Mary team, it's not so much about the win. It's not about the opponent. You know, the first thing to realize here is William & Mary is very, very poor. You know, Rum is averaging 0.5 points a game, hasn't made a field goal all year. You know, Brown is just not going to score for them. Down low, they're going to be, Rick Jackson's just going to eat them up once again. And their small forward is just not going to hit enough threes against the zone. It's just not going to happen. William & Mary is a pretty bad team. But the thing that people and fans should be expecting out of this game is you have these days off. Classic Jim Boeheim Syracuse teams, are they just going to take it right from the get-go? Are they going to show they are a top 10, top 15 team, which they haven't shown all year? If they can get out to a 17-5 lead from the beginning, then I think you have faith in the Syracuse team. If it's something similar to these last few games, after all this time off, then there's concerns heading into Atlantic City. And I think there's concerns that they're not going to come out of there with 2 victories like many people expected. But my prediction for this game is 79-57 SU.
Yeah, and I'm predicting Syracuse to win by 54. And Tony, I think you bring up a good point. I think they need to make this a complete game, especially against a very poor William & Mary team, and they need to get out to one of those, like you said, 17-5 leads to kind of establish themselves, and they need to carry it over. So far it's just been the second half, and they need to show a complete game. But that's all for this edition of On the Beat. We'll have all your updates on Sunday with live tweeting, and we'll have game coverage up on the website Sunday. So be sure to check back for those. And signing off from 744 Ostrom.